Hello, everyone, and welcome into Froggy Talkin Sports with Ryan and Joe. My name is Ryan Peters, and I'm joined with Joe Spillman, like we are every week here on a Thursday. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent, right? I get to talk sports with you this week, and it always makes me happy.
We have a busy week here at Froggy 95.9. We've already started with one basketball game, still have three more left on the docket. But let's go ahead and dive in to the worldwide sports arena. No, we're not going to talk about the World Cup, even though that's part of our Saturday as well. But we're going to talk a little bit about college football. And Joe, it was a little rough Saturday, and then it somehow got rougher the next day, maybe,
Uh,
possibly. You tell me.
it was all around bad weekend until obviously Sunday. If you are an Ohio or a Cincinnati football fan in any form, of course, you know the Bengals get the big win on Sunday against the Titans. But Friday, the Bearcats decided to lose to Tulane and kept them out of the AAC Conference Championship. And then Saturday, the Buckeyes decided to absolutely get destroyed by the Michigan Wolverines, which will potentially keep them out of the playoffs, and really as it probably should, the way that they played. And then of course on Sunday we find out that Luke Fickell, the beloved coach of the Cincinnati Bearcats, has decided to leave for greener pastures and head to Wisconsin. And by greener pastures, I mean greener paper money that he's going to have more of.
But actually, there might be more pastures.
No, that's actually true. There probably is more pastures. Yes, but at the end of the day, I really like what Luke Fickell has built in Cincinnati with the Bearcats. He really kind of brought them back from the Brian Kelly debacle, and of course debacle, and you know all about that being a Notre Dame fan, and what he kind of did to Notre Dame last year. So Luke Fickell has been an amazing recruiter. He's built an amazing team. Was able to get the first non-Power Five team into the college football playoffs last year with the team that he built. And I really think that this is probably a long time coming. I think that last year he probably would have left, and of course he probably would have left for more money last year. But he did the honorable thing, knowing that his Bearcats were going to be playing in the college football playoffs, and he decided not to take any job offers or interview for any job offers until after the season was over last year. And as you know, most major college programs, Ryan, they try to fill those vacancies fairly quickly because you don't want a big gap in your program. So I don't know where. I have a couple ideas where the Bearcats might go from here, but right now it's kind of if you're a UC Bearcat fan, you are definitely in limbo right now.
Well, let me tell you this, Joe. I actually think if Ohio State doesn't make the college football playoffs, that Ryan Day won't be at Ohio State next year. I don't think he'll get fired, but I think Ryan Day was on the precipice of leaving last year to the Chicago Bears based on a bunch of different stuff that I read. I would not be surprised if he does the same thing this year if they don't make it to the college football playoff. Now, they're fifth. They still got a really good chance. I mean, there's some things that could definitely roll their way, but I think Ohio may be looking for two coaches. I made that statement last year, and it ended up coming into fruition. Obviously, Ohio State had a good year, except for the last game last year. Um, you mentioned the Brian Kelly. You called it a debacle, which I mean, it was what, an Orange Bowl, Sugar Bowl. Which
Right,
one was it?
right. It was one of those two. It was a New Year's Six bowl.
Against
So
Florida. It was against
right.
Florida, and the debacle was he just left out of like in the middle of the night, kind of like what he does
That's the same
now.
thing he did to Cincinnati as well.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
I was
yeah, okay.
actually alluding to Cincinnati. Yeah,
Okay.
and I think Armand Benz was the one that came out really upset about that, if I remember correctly, and called Kelly a snake. He didn't say that, but the media did, and then goes to Notre Dame, does the same thing to go to LSU. But it's been rumored for a while now when it comes to Luke Fickell leaving Cincinnati. It's almost like, you know, it's going to happen, and at some point, does that help alleviate any of it? Did it still sting the fact that he left? Did losing the AAC make it easier to see him watch or leave? I mean, tell me the emotion behind it.
Well, so as you know, and I know that you've accused me of this around other people a couple times, that I hate everybody if they lose, and I am driven
I
by
don't accuse you of that. I look at your social media pages.
yeah. So if I'm a fan of your team and you're the head coach and you lose a game, I hate you for at least a week. It's just how it is. But in all reality, I really like Luke Fickell, and I thought last year when he decided to stay, because I thought he should have been gone last year. if it were me, I probably would have left last year because I know he probably could be coaching at Notre Dame right now. But it still stings because I thought when he said, no, I'm going to stick around, and then he signed that contract through, I believe, 2028. I really thought, okay, this is outside the norm. He's going to be loyal. He's going to build this program, and by God, he got a taste of it. He's going to win a national championship with the Cincinnati Bearcats. And maybe I'm a delusional fan, and I know that sounds delusional, but that's what I was hoping for. That's what I thought might happen. Obviously, we get to 2022. He loses 3 games this year, doesn't win an AAC title like he has done, and then the next day after their last football game of the season, he's like, "Peace out, guys. I'm heading out."
Well, here's where I think that you're not delusional. TCU is now ranked 3rd in the college football playoff. If they were still in the Mountain West, no way, no shape, no how would they be ranked 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the Big 12. Well, where's Cincinnati going?
Right.
To the Big 12. So I totally understand where you're coming from with the fact that the brightest days were coming ahead for the fact that you were finally moving conferences into a respectable conference from top to bottom, at least in terms from the college football playoff committee. And now that that's gone, now you enter this unknown territory that you've never been before, not moving conferences, but of joining a huge conference in the Big 12. And there's no captain of the ship.
Right.
You know, it's almost, to me, last year would have been much better for him to leave instead of it being now commandeering going into a brand new conference that, you know, is completely different competition.
No, 100%. And I think the move that Cincinnati's going to have into the Big East, I believe that's going to be the 2024 season, I believe.
Big 12.
So, big, what'd I say, Big East?
Yeah, you're in the past.
No, man. The Big 12. Yeah, the Big 12. I believe that's the 2024 season. But as you know, we discussed the college football playoffs on a previous show, Ryan, and we talked about the new format, I believe, moving into 2028 or 2027. I don't remember what year. But, you know, we kind of stated that it would almost benefit Cincinnati to stay in the AAC now because it's a conference that they could win year in and year out. And I think that they win the AAC next year. I think that Evan Prater is develops and you know, some of their defensive secondary that was lacking this year gets better. I mean, now that's kind of unforeseen because we don't know who's going to be turning the ship now. So, you know, they could be absolutely horrible. A new coach could come in and say, you know what, I know Cincinnati has invested all this time and resource into you, Mr. Prater, but you're really not conducive to the offense that I want to run. You know, you run a lot and you scramble out of the pocket, and I need a pocket passer because that's the type of offense I run. So I'd hit the transfer portal if I was you, buddy. And so those are like the unknowns that every Cincinnati Bearcat fan is going through right now is what is our team going to look like? I mean, we were on the precipice of greatness, and I know a lot of people say that Cincinnati got embarrassed by Alabama, but I don't really think so. I think they competed for a better part of a half into the third quarter of that game, and then, you know, Alabama was just too much last year in the playoffs. So, but for a non-Power 5 team to make it that far and to really have the foundation of getting there again with a young quarterback that's reminiscent of a Desmond Ridder, some young guys in the secondary that are reminiscent of a Sauce Gardner and really playing well, to where we are right now saying, what are we going to do? And unfortunately, this is the second time Cincinnati's been in this situation. Notre Dame was in this situation, or the same situation going into this year. Of course, Notre Dame and Cincinnati are both caused by the same guy who just chases money. But my question is, and where we're at right now, you see this a lot in college football. You don't see this too much in the NFL where people are chasing jobs because once they get there, they're secure, and the NFL pays well, and you make your money in the NFL, and people understand that a good coach will bring you wins. But in college football, we see like a coach will have success, they'll build a program, and then they're just gone, and it leaves that program in devastation. I don't feel like it's a great thing for college football. I don't know how you feel about it. How do you feel about it?
Well, I mean, if I believe in a capitalistic marketplace, at any time, any person can leave depending upon who values them the most. And, you know, I think that's what we see now. I think that we've evened the playing field finally and let students transfer the way they should be. There's no reason why a coach shouldn't be able to leave anytime he wants to, but a student is regarded as, oh, no, you committed to me. You're here for the long haul. when we do see that a coach's commitment is, changing by the day, depending on who does flash that money bag. I don't think that I would go to the complete terms of leaving USC in shambles. I think that they're in a good spot. They've had good recruits. They built up enough of a brand to to really show themselves as the second best team in the state of Ohio, and they're located in an area that produces really good high school football. There's a pipeline of good recruits right there that UC could dip into. I mean, that's what Brian Kelly did at Notre Dame. I mean, that's how he got a lot of his really good recruits, was dipping in that Elder pipeline, that Moeller insert school in that area. So I've never been a big detractor of coaches leaving. It's just part of the process. I think all people in high positions end up leaving, and more often than not, it is to chase money. That being said, that you mentioned greener pastures. Wisconsin may not be greener pastures. It may be a lot worse, and it may not be the best decision Luke Fickell ever made. In fact, maybe Notre Dame was the best decision he could have made last year. I'm almost positive he could have made that decision last year. The thing that UC needs to do, and I thought this is what Notre Dame did well, was find their guy quick, which thankfully for Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman was on staff. That didn't take long.
Right.
And then they built an assistant coach program around him with the likes of Harry Heastan, who's been there before, who sends players to the NFL all the time. And that's where I think in college things are really important, especially in the collegiate side of football, is finding those skill position coaches. And you mentioned it, Joe. That started as soon as Ryan Day had rumors. That didn't start 3 days ago. As soon as they heard Ryan Day could have possibly left or was possibly leaving, they had to have had that phone call. But my question to you is, who does that phone call go to?
Yeah, I have no idea. If you're
Do
talking
you think he's on roster now, the head coach?
Ryan Day,
No, for Fickell. Like, do you think is there an assistant coach on Cincinnati's staff right now that could step in and be the head coach? Do you think that they go internally, or do you think that it's externally?
No, I think they've almost signaled. I wasn't sure what you were asking there.
I'm sorry.
I think you accidentally said Ryan Day. You were talking about Luke Fickell. I was a little confused.
Right, my bad.
It's okay. So I think they've already signaled. I think Cincinnati's already signaled that they're not going internally, because typically, who do you look at? If you're going to go internally and appoint a coach that knows the program and knows what's going on, who are you going to appoint? You're going to appoint either your defensive coordinator or your offensive coordinator, right? Gino Guidugli, who was a beloved player in Cincinnati, and really kind of was the player that really started the upward ascension for Cincinnati as being a relevant team in college football, is the current offensive coordinator. Well, instead of naming him the interim head coach, which I thought he would do, they make the special teams coordinator the interim head coach. Obviously, they're not going to, and he's not going to stick around as the head coach. He's obviously not a guy that you're going to say, okay, you're going to be the head coach of this football program. Now, he does have head coaching experience. He was the head coach at several relevant high schools in the Cincinnati area as a head coach for a high school team, but I don't think he's not a Division I college head coach right now, or is he going to be? I think Gino Guidugli could have been there and built a program. I think by not appointing Gino Guidugli the interim head coach, I think which college football is a little different than the NFL. Like we talked about the coach, why make Jeff Saturday the interim head coach, right? And we really couldn't come up with a reason, especially since there's several people on the coaching staff there that you may look to and go, oh, this might be a good guy. College football is a little bit different. If you're going to look internally at, say, a Gino Guidugli, why not appoint him now? You don't need to wait him a year. You go into your bowl game, appoint him now, let him get to work. So to me, that almost signals 100% they're not going internally. I know there's been rumors flying, Deion Sanders, Rick Minner's son up in Michigan, and a couple other people. I'm not sure what direction they're going to go. I think, the Deion Sanders name, and Deion Sanders is loved in Cincinnati. He's a Cincinnati Red and has a history with the Cincinnati population. But at the end of the day, playing and coaching at Jackson State is playing and or coaching at Jackson State. And I'm not saying that Deion Sanders isn't a great coach, but I think a lot of the things that revolve around him are more of a gimmick to sell than than are actually attributes that will make him a great coach in Cincinnati. And I kind of, I guess, said that softly because I don't want to offend too many people. I like Deion Sanders. I hope they don't hire Deion Sanders as the next head coach for the Cincinnati Bearcats.
Is Urban Meyer the top of the list?
I think Urban Meyer's kind of already signaled that he is not going to do it. I would like to see Urban Meyer, and I know a lot of people would go, especially with his history and with his NFL stint last year, and I kind of lost a little respect for him. But there is one thing for certain. Urban Meyer can build a football program, he can build a football team, and he knows how to coach. And if you're looking for 100% success as a Cincinnati Bearcat fan, you could only hope that Cincinnati decides to hire Urban Meyer. But I don't think he'll take the job.
So if you could name a candidate perfect for you as the fan before you get on Twitter and put #fire and then insert coach,
Right?
Who would it be right now that you like?
You just said him, Urban Meyer.
Is it Urban
yeah,
Meyer?
I wish I'm hoping with all fabric of my being that Urban Meyer decides to go, you know what? I went to Cincinnati. I like Ohio. I want to get back into coaching, and I sure would like to go beat Ohio State one of these days. I'm going to go to Cincinnati. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Is there a player out there, a former Bearcat player that might fit the mold that makes sense?
Well, and really, I kind of already said that. Gino Guidugli, he's the offensive coordinator right now. I think his play calling's been a little suspect at times this year, but I didn't hate it. And he's a first-year offensive coordinator. I think he could have made a great head coach. He worked his way up within that organization. He was an assistant, and then last year he was the quarterback's coach. This year he's the offensive coordinator, or he was the quarterback coach for a couple years, but then this year, first-year offensive coordinator. And I think he did well. I mean, really, at the end of the day, first-year offensive coordinator, you're starting over with you lost 11 players, 11 starters on both sides of the ball coming into this season, and you still go 9-3, and you compete all year long. Did they have their rough moments? Yeah, they did, but Gino Guidugli did a pretty good job, I thought. So,
do you think the quarterback competition, did that fall on Gino or did that fall on Luke?
I don't know. I don't know. Gino Guidugli was a pocket passer, so probably on Gino. I don't know that he ever necessarily liked the Desmond Reader roll out and run style quarterbacking, but it worked for him. So
yeah, it most certainly worked. That would be an understatement at best. So that's going to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed the first segment. Joe, you got quite a few guests coming up, so it's going to be a great show. I know you're looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a great show. We got Mike Goodpastor coming up on our show, Ryan. He's going to talk about the college football playoffs, and then our good friend Ty Robbins, who writes a weekly Bengals article for Stripe Hype called Ty's Take. He's going to jump on and our show out to talk a little Bengals and injuries and what the Bengals need to do to clinch the AFC North over the next couple games. And, of course, you and I will be at the Bengals game this coming Sunday to root on the Bengals against Kansas City, right?
The jungle is going to be wild.
Yes, sir.
So we'll be right back after the break. You're listening to Froggy Talkin Sports with Ryan and Joe, and sometimes Mike and Ty.
Hello, and welcome back into Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. We have a great second segment for you. I have my good friend here. He is the founder and chief editor of the Grueling Truth Sports Network, Mike Goodpastor. Mike, how you doing?
How you doing, Joe? I'm always doing great when I'm talking to Joe Spillman.
That's right. I love talking to you, Mike. Well, Mike, the reason why we have you on the show tonight is we had, I guess, a tumultuous week in college football, to say the least. We got the brand new college football playoff rankings that came out on Tuesday night. And I kind of wanted to give your expert take. I kind of wanted to get your expert take on what we saw come out and what your thoughts are moving forward in the championship weekend. So let's get right into it. Tuesday night, the college football playoff rankings came out. Of course, Georgia's still number one. Michigan, with their thumping of Ohio State, is number two. Both undefeated teams, by the way. TCU, who I believe has played a very quality schedule, is number three. And USC at 11-1 currently is fourth, followed by Ohio State and Alabama. Ohio State, of course, has one loss. Alabama has two. So before we get into the games this week, in your opinion, out of the top four teams right now, are there any teams that are safe no matter what happens this weekend?
I think Georgia's safe. I think Michigan's safe. I actually think all four teams should be safe, though, to tell you the truth. I don't think there's a fifth team that deserves it. I think when you look at Ohio State, if Michigan was to lose, you can't put Ohio State over Michigan because Michigan just beat them by 22 points. Alabama's got 2 losses. I think the only reason we're discussing this is because of lack of respect that the Big 12 and the Pac-12 have. TCU's an undefeated team that beat a lot of good teams. USC's only lost 1 game. That was to Utah by a point. Utah was a team ranked in a lot of people's top 5 before the year even started.
Right. So that having said, of course, our first game of playoff weekend is Utah and USC, and Utah already has a win over USC. So you believe, or do you think, if Utah is able to pull out that what I would call upset this week, do you think USC is safe with 2 losses over Ohio State?
No, I think they'll bump them immediately because Ohio State and Alabama give you better ratings. So they're probably going to put Ohio State in. If you get a TCU loss, you get Alabama in. And I think the thing people don't understand is this. If we had a TCU, USC, Georgia, and Michigan, to me, that Final Four is much more interesting because I haven't seen that Final Four.
Right.
I've seen the Ohio or the Alabama-Ohio State shows, and that's fine when they're good enough to be there. They're not good enough to be there this year.
Oh, no, I agree. So even in your opinion, and you just said that, if TCU happens to lose to Kansas State this weekend, and say in a world where USC loses to Utah, you think that they will put, the College Football Playoff Committee will put a 2-loss Alabama in over a USC or over a TCU?
Yeah, I think in a heartbeat they will because we saw how difficult it was for UC to get in there last year. Even though they're undefeated, they had to win against Notre Dame. If you look at the competition TCU's played, TCU's schedule, I mean, is comparable to Alabama's because I'm sorry, but when you lose games, do you really get credit if you get blown out by a team? I mean, Alabama lost to Tennessee. My question is, Tennessee lost to South Carolina. They're a 2-loss team also. But how does Alabama right now sit ahead of Tennessee, a team that beat them a month ago?
No, that's a great question.
I mean, it's all about ratings. It's all about money.
Yeah, and really, I lost all confidence in the College Football Playoff Committee last year, as you know, Mike, and I think you are too. I am a University of Cincinnati fan, and that's a whole other story, what happened with UC and Luke Fickell this weekend, and I don't think we have enough time to get into that. But, you know, what I saw out of the College Football Playoff Committee last year was a committee that did everything that they could to keep a non-Power 5 team out of the playoffs. And I think any scenario that would have arose that they could have justified in just the littlest possible bit to keep Cincinnati out, they would have. And what I fear is that is the same position that TCU is in right now. And I think that you already alluded to that. So what is...
Well, how about this real quick, Joe?
Okay.
This is why this happens. It's not because they're small conferences. It's because the Big 12 and Pac-12, their TV deals are much smaller than the Big 10 in the SEC. The problem is with a team like UC or UCF a few years ago, or any of the teams that may have had a shot to get in, is if one of those teams are allowed in, those millions of dollars all goes to that conference, and it gets taken away from the SEC, the Big Ten. Those guys lose money. So the best way to do this is if you want to reward, ESPN wants to reward the guys they get billions and millions of dollars to. Those teams are Big Ten teams and SEC teams. You know, the Pac-12 is on Fox, right?
Right.
The Big 12 is on Fox. The TV deal's not as big. They're trying to reward the guys that bring in all the money to the networks, which is fine, but just call it that then and quit acting like everybody has a chance because they don't. They simply don't. I mean, if UC, put it like this, if Notre Dame would have lost like 2 or 3 extra games last year, UC's never getting in.
Right. Oh, yeah, and I think
we watched UCF have 2 undefeated seasons in a row, and at the end of the first undefeated season, beat an SEC school in the Cotton Bowl, and the next year they go undefeated. They're still not in, and I believe the first year where they didn't get in and they went undefeated, they beat 4 top 25 teams that year.
Yeah, and I really can't run down the list because I can't name them off the top of my head, but since the inception of the college football playoffs system, which I believe was 2014, and I think Ohio State, or I know Ohio State won the first one, but I think that was 2014 if I'm not mistaken. I know for a fact that there have been teams out there that were better than the national championship teams that simply just did not have a shot to compete in that tournament.
We don't know if they were better, but we never can find out. It's just like last year, people say, well, UC got beat 24-6, they didn't even belong. I hate to tell you this, but the UC game was still competitive at the start of the fourth quarter. It was 17-6. Michigan and Georgia, on the other hand, that game was over before the first quarter was over. Nobody right now is saying Michigan doesn't belong in because they got hammered last year. UC lost 24-6. If UC would have went undefeated this year, everybody would have said, well, they had their chance last year. They got hammered. Nobody says that about Michigan. Nobody says that on all the numerous attempts Ohio State and Notre Dame have made and gotten the break speed off of them.
Right. What was it, 2020 or 2019 that Notre Dame went in and got the break speed off of them in the first round?
Notre Dame has been blown out multiple times in the last 6 years. Ohio State's been blown out a few times.
Right. Well, let's look at the upcoming games that we have going into college play championship weekend. I can't talk today, Mike. So the first game up we have Friday night is Utah, the 11th ranked Utah Utes at USC. What do you think we're going to see in that game, and do you think Utah has a chance to pull this out? Obviously, they already have a win over USC this year.
Yeah, and the bookmakers, I think, right now have USC as just a 2.5-point favorite, which tells
correct.
you on a neutral field is 2.5. It'd probably pick them at either place. Maybe USC's favored by 3 at home. But I think what we've seen is I think USC's defense has improved since that first game. They've got Caleb Williams at quarterback, who probably solidified the Heisman last week in his game against Notre Dame. It doesn't get better. I think it's the same thing Carson Palmer did to win the Heisman back in the day, around 2002,
Yeah.
where he basically won the Heisman by a national TV audience, just destroying Notre Dame. And they beat Notre Dame 38-27. I don't know that USC could play with the Georgia, but I know this. If you got a guy like Caleb Williams, he can make plays to win you that game. I think the one thing people overlook here is Utah, talent-wise, is as good as anybody in the country. I mean, Utah's they lost this year at the start of the season to Florida, which is a game they never should have lost. They've got a quarterback named Cameron Rising, who played out of his mind against Ohio State and Rose Bowl. He's been in big situations before. I think this is a great matchup. The point spread's 2.5. I think they've got it nailed. I really wouldn't want to give 2.5 points either way in that game, but I would favor USC because I think they're playing for a little bit more. They've got Caleb Williams, but I think this game goes down to the wire. The last game was 43-42. I just actually wrote an article on the Grueling Truth where my prediction was 45-38 USC. So I think USC wins this game. But I think out of these two games, this is where we have the best chance of an upset.
Oh, very well. Yeah, as a quasi-Ohio State fan, I do root for Ohio State. I'm looking just because of my fandom for Ohio State to get in. I know that you don't feel that way, but that's just me being selfish.
They just got beat by 22 points.
I know. I said I'm just being selfish, Mike. I don't think that they deserve to be there.
No, you're being a little – I don't want to call you stupid over the air. You're being slow. Because really they got beat by 22 points.
I know they did.
And I think right now if Ohio State – if Michigan plays Georgia, Georgia's probably going to be favored by 5 or 6 points. So most people don't even think Michigan's the best team. And they went to Ohio State. They imposed their will on them. They physically dominated them. So that tells me if they play a second time, usually a team, you can come back. Like USC, Utah. USC, I think, can come back and win. They didn't get physically dominated by Utah. It was a shootout. When you have a team that comes to your house, is behind at halftime, and then physically runs the ball down your throat with a linebacker, and because their best running back's not there, how do you recover from that? Because you just got physically manhandled by a team. You don't recover from that. And, it's the same thing with Bama. Bama could have easily lost the Ole Miss game. Bama could easily have 4 or 5 losses. They're not the same team that they were. And I don't see anybody here that could replace either one of these teams. I think right now these are the 4 best teams in the country. And I think people need to leave it alone. They won't because it gets TV ratings. If you say right now everybody's in, nobody cares.
Right.
But, what happens? My big question here is what happens if LSU was to beat Georgia? How do you take Georgia or Alabama over an LSU team that just won the SEC?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know what the fix of that is, other than to say, well, obviously the playoff change or playoff format is changing in a couple of years. I believe that's 2026 or 2028. I don't remember off the top of my head where they're going to bring 12 teams in, and I don't necessarily like the format how it's set up with Notre Dame unless they join a conference, never being able to get a 1 through 4 seed. But
they shouldn't be able to. Yeah, because the way this is going, there's only going to be 2 or 3 conferences 5 or 6 years from now. That's the way it's setting up. Notre Dame needs to get in the conference. There's no, they're the only ones. It used to be, you had Notre Dame in basketball, Marquette, DePaul, they weren't in conferences. Football, you had multiple programs that weren't in conferences. And you had enough teams that were independents in the mid 80s that could have made a good college football conference. Now it's Notre Dame, and Notre Dame does it strictly for the money. And Notre Dame's eventually going to go to the Big Ten or the SEC because the money to Big Ten and the SEC right now is astronomical. And Notre Dame has already shown now, actually, since they fired Jerry Faust and hired Lou Holtz, they have let everybody realize that they're no different than anybody else.
Oh yeah, I mean I can't disagree with anything you're saying. Let's talk about the Kansas State TCU game. What are you looking at in that game, and what would Kansas State have to do to upset TCU? I know the first time that they played, I think it was a 38-28 game. I think that was week 7 or 8 of the season. Do you think Kansas State can give TCU a game, or is this game even going to be close?
Yeah, I think the game's damn near a toss-up. I mean, if you watch the first game, Kansas State led 28-10, and then TCU scores 28 unanswered points. But Kansas State's a really good football team. Both these teams score points. I mean, I don't think it's beyond the realm of comprehension. Both games can be upsets. I just give Utah a little bit better chance. Because if I had to call these games, I think USC-Utah is like 51-49 USC, not the score, but percentage of chances to win. I think Kansas State has a 45% chance to win here. I think they have a definite chance to pull this off. They're a very good football team. They played a good schedule. And, I mean, if you look at it, same thing. The point spread by the bookies in Vegas, this is considered even a closer matchup than USC-Utah because right now what I see is TCU's favored by 2. And the thing that's mind-blowing is TCU is doing this with a new coach.
Right, and really I think, we could talk all day about Georgia, but I think out of the teams in the top 4, I think TCU might have played one of the toughest schedules in the top 4 right now. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, Michigan's schedule was crap. They beat Ohio State. What was their next best win? Penn State.
Right.
Penn State's overrated. I mean, the Big Ten and the SEC, I know there's a lot of SEC people out there that think they're the greatest conference in the world. But outside of Bama and Georgia, who else does anything? LSU every once in a while. The Big Ten, it's Ohio State or it's Michigan. Penn State every once in a while. The Big 12 is a conference where, I mean, TCU, Baylor's always good. Kansas State's good. Hell, Kansas was good this year. I mean, TCU have to go. I mean, they didn't beat Kansas until late in that game in Kansas. So, I mean, really, if you go top to bottom, or at least top to the middle, if you go top 8 teams, I think the Big 12 is as good as any of them. I think they're definitely better than the Big 10. But, I mean, we saw with the SEC, they're always overrated. I mean, hell, at one point, Kentucky was ranked 9th.
Right.
And then they lose like 4 games, including getting beat by Vanderbilt. I mean, Ole Miss, I think, was a good quality team. LSU is a quality team. But other than that, you got the top 4, you got everybody else. Almost every conference is the same way. The SEC is considered the best because they have Bama and Georgia. You know, the ACC is completely dropped off the map. So it is what it is. And I hate when people say that, by the way, so I want to smack myself. But
Well, it
I
is
think right now, we've got the best 4 teams. I think what we should do is this. If Kansas State and Utah win, they should get the spots.
Oh, man.
Why not? They won their conference.
I understand that, and
Let me give you
moving
this.
forward,
Ohio State and Alabama didn't even finish in the top 2.
No, I know, and I think moving forward, and I think that's one of the reasons why college football is going to move to the format that they're moving to.
And by the way, would
top
either
12
one of those
teams?
teams would either one of those teams have better wins than beating USC twice?
No, I don't.
What's Ohio State's best win? They beat Notre Dame.
Right.
Big whoop.
Yeah.
I mean,
we
watched, and I
they
hate to
play
say this, but USC beat Notre Dame a lot easier than Ohio State did.
right. I don't think Ohio State's played well this year. I think they set up a schedule to ensure that their only possible loss of the season can come down to the last game of the season against Michigan. I don't think that they do the things that they need to do to maintain their stature as a top program in the country. But that is my honest opinion of it.
Also, Ohio State people have a very overinflated opinion of their program because Ryan Day is 45-5, and everybody wants him fired.
Well, he lost.
That's kind of moronic.
It is moronic,
No
but you don't lose to Michigan twice, Mike. Tell me about Michigan Purdue. Speaking of Michigan, we got to move on from that.
Michigan will do what they did to Iowa last year. Michigan will beat the hell out of Purdue. I think I can say hell, right? It's a noun because it's a place.
I think so. I think.
Okay,
Hopefully,
just making sure.
Hopefully,
I don't want you to get in trouble.
Yeah. Hopefully the FCC is not too hard.
I don't know. I'm a little excited. I'm feeling a little froggy today, Joe.
Yeah. Well, you're on Froggy Talkin Sports.
I know. That's why I'm feeling froggy.
All right. Last game of playoff weekend. Well, it's not the last game of championship weekend. Georgia LSU.
Georgia going to beat the heck out of LSU. I mean, I don't think those 2 games were even competitive. I mean, I think Purdue with the O'Connell kid could be slightly dangerous for Michigan. But I mean, my first thought would have been like it was last year when Michigan finally beat Ohio State. They're playing Iowa the next week, and you're thinking, man, it's like the NFL, the trap game. There's got to be a letdown because they just played a great game. They beat their big rival. There has to be a letdown. There was no letdown last year. And the reason there wasn't a letdown because Iowa wasn't any good. The one difference this year is, well, Iowa's good defensively, horrible offensively. But there's a big deal between the Petraeus kid who plays quarterback at Iowa and Aiden O'Connell. O'Connell could go off and keep them in the game, but I think Michigan physically in the second half will pound them and overtake them and beat them by double digits.
Great take. Mike, unfortunately, we are running out of time. I always appreciate
Hey, who won last night? Switzerland County girls or the Milan girls?
Switzerland County by a bunch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But they didn't win the state championship in 1954.
That is correct. I always enjoy talking to you, Mike. Real quick, tell me about what's going on in the Grueling Truth right now.
Nothing right now because I'm on here with you. But you can find let's see, what are you playing this out? Every week you catch the NFL prediction show with myself, Joe Spillman. Make sure you follow us at Grilling Truth on Twitter. But for all your sports needs, go check out thegruelingtruth.com. And as always, it's been great to be on here with you, Joe.
Thanks, Mike. Like I said, I always have fun talking to you, and I'm sure you'll be back on the show.
You know, the
at some
thing that
point.
really amazes me is this. If you're watching this, you'll notice that even though I coached Joe when he was in 7th grade, Joe now looks like he probably coached me in 7th grade.
Stop it. And you do bring up a good point. I do want to remind our listeners that if you cannot catch this show live, you can always head over to the Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe Facebook page and catch these videos live. And we also actually play them out on the Grueling Truth, Mike. So, you can catch us there as well.
They can find that on the YouTube channel for the Grueling Truth.
Yeah, they sure can. Mike.
You can find it on iHeartRadio too, but Joe never takes the time to put the audio version on Spreaker.
Mike, I appreciate you talking with me. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
Hello, and welcome to our final segment here on Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. We have one of our good friends back this week. He's a writer. He writes Ty's Take, a weekly Bengals article that you can find on the Grueling Truth or Stripe Hype. Ty Robbins, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Traveled to Nashville over the weekend, got to see another rematch of the Titans game, and it really proved that these guys can win even without their big guns like Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase. So, and the defense stepped up as well. So it was a great time. A lot of Bengal fans down there hooting and hollering, and who days all over the place. So I think every time I've been down the last 2 times to Nashville, it's like the Bengal fans take over the Music City.
Oh, yeah. So I went down for the divisional round last year, and it seemed like Nashville was just flooded with Cincinnati fans. I know a couple of them disappeared after the weekend, but from what I understand, that turned out to be self-induced. But, Nashville was always a good time. It seems like that's the second home to the Bengals. But you were at the game, and I know it was a big win. Bengals ended up winning by 4. Would have actually been 6 if it wasn't for the late penalty. But what did you see? What did you see in that game without Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon? I thought P. Ryan played pretty well.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of talent at running back. Travion Williams has run the ball very successfully, and I think Evans, given he didn't have a lot of playing time there, but if need be, he can catch the ball out of the field and make things happen. So they've got some playmakers if Joe Mixon can't play this weekend. I thought the line did exceptionally well. Each week now from here on out, really starting with Pittsburgh, they're going to face some really tough defensive lines. And I thought Jonah Williams really stepped up. And Lyle Collins, and he stepped up, and they really, when you talk about that middle interior group of Caddis, Kappa, and the rookie Volson, they did a good job against Simmons, and so they opened up some holes, and P. Ryan was able to make some big plays and get some yards when needed. So I was really impressed with how the line is held up for Joe Burrow to actually, execute a lot of his passes and, get a running game going in this second part of the season.
Yeah, as you know, last year in the divisional game, I think off the top of my head, Joe Burrow was sacked, I think, 9 times in that game. Is that right?
Yeah, he was.
And so last year, and then you move forward, a year to this year, and I think he came out of Sunday's game with 1 sack. Yeah, I think he was sacked 1 time, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely, you could see a huge improvement on that line. Now, La'el Collins came out of the game hurt. Have you heard anything about him or how he's doing?
He came out for a couple plays and came back in, so he finished the game. Adeniji came in for a couple plays
Right.
while he came back, and so he had today off, but he always has Wednesdays off as a veteran. He's had it since the beginning of the season, so I think that's just precautionary. But like I said, these guys are going to be tested each and every week now. The big test last week with the Steelers, with oh my goodness, all the big play with Watts, starting with Watson, and they really held up, and then to come back and see this Titan team that's been playing extremely well. Now they didn't have the same defensive linemen that they had when they got the 9 sacks, but they've been playing extremely well all the way up until that game. So it really shows what this offensive line is made of. And I'll tell you what I really like too is that we've been a team of second half adjustments. Luana Rumo has done a fantastic job of making adjustments and slowing down, the offense of the other side. So when you talk about King Henry, they really, slowed his production down and kept him from making big plays. And
Yeah.
so that helped a lot.
What did he have? I think Derrick Henry had about 76 yards, 70 yards, something like that. But I felt like they kind of shut him down for what he's done to other teams this year. He's an incredible running back. So we're moving forward into Kansas City. Kansas City's coming to Cincinnati this week, and obviously always a threat. Cincinnati's owned them the last couple times they've played. Big comeback wins both times. But Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce's coming to Cincinnati. What do the Bengals need to do, or what have you seen? What do they need to do to be successful this weekend?
Well, each year it's different. Last year they really had, they came together and they shut down those wide receivers, and they put a lot of pressure on Mahomes. They call him, Lou Anarumo. He's like the mad scientist doctor. You know what I mean?
Right.
He comes up with all these defenses, and he really threw Mahomes off with some, Hubbard dropping back into coverage and stuff that you wouldn't normally see. So I think they just have to really put a lot of pressure on Mahomes, right? And that is going to help out our cornerbacks, because now that Chidobe Awuzie is out, Cam Taylor-Britt, our rookie, has stepped in. He's really done a pretty decent job for a rookie, and Eli Apple's on the other side. And I think when you have veteran safeties like Von Bell and Jesse Bates back there, it really helps bring together a unit where they can talk and they communicate. But putting pressure on Mahomes is going to be, Mahomes going to make big plays. That's just what he does. He's
Right.
just super talented. He leads the NFL in passing. But if you could make him uncomfortable or make him get rid of the ball a little bit sooner, I think that's really going to help
Yeah,
us out.
and I think this week, I think it's probably would lead to more success with the Bengals. I think that they have to keep Mahomes under 300 yards in the air. I think that they have to shut Travis Kelce down. I think that will lead to a lot of success, because we've seen at least Kansas City at times they've struggled when Mahomes and Travis Kelce can't connect with each other. And I know our secondary is a little beat up, but you're right. The rookie you were just talking about, I already forgot his
Cam
name.
Taylor-Britt.
Yeah, he made an amazing play last week, caused a fumble on Derrick Henry. I think Bates kind of just stared at it like he's never seen a fumble before. I don't know what was going on there, but I think he's playing well, and I think he's gotten better each of the last 2 weeks. And I think he played really well this week. So, what do they do? Do you think, what adjustments do you think can be made, or what do they do to shut Travis Kelce down? Do you have any thought on that?
Yeah, he is a playmaker, and he can hurt you big time. I mean, he had big plays on us the last 2 games. I think Trey Flowers, they usually match up with him. He's done a really good job of trying to contain him, or, they'll shadow Jesse Bates on him or linebacker on him. So I think they really need to focus on him. They also, got Juju Smith-Schuster, sorry. And he who came out of Seattle. Now that they don't have Tyreek Hill, a lot of people thought, well, he doesn't have his top, receiver. It's going to slow him down, but he reminds me a lot of Burrow in the way that he attacks defenses with all of his weapons, right? He
Right.
just doesn't have a go guy besides Kelsey. And then he's going to hit all of his targets. And Joe Burrow does the same thing. I mean, you take out, Jamar Chase, and he's got T. Higgins, and he's got Boyd, and he's got Hayden Hurst, and he can hit Mixon out of the backfield. So there's a lot of weapons that Mahomes is going to use. I also like, they got a lot of people in the draft. The Chiefs did that I liked. That I was looking for the Bengals to see if they could, like Sky Moore, the
Right.
fast, speedy receiver. I want to see what he has. So I also wanted to see what the cornerbacks. I know the Chiefs picked up Trent McDuffie out of Washington, and we were looking at. I mean, he was one of the names that were, pushed around when the Bengals were before we took Dax Hill. We were looking at, and last week we got to see Roger McCreary out of Auburn. We were also looking. He was on my list. I never thought safety. I always thought cornerback last year. So it's neat to see some of those guys that were in the draft that you're looking at, and you're saying, "Well, I wonder if the Bengals are going to pick them up to actually play against the Bengals."
Yeah. So right now the Bengals are currently sitting at 7-4, tied with actually not tied. The Ravens have the edge due to the one-on-one matchup that the Ravens won, but both teams currently sitting at 7-4. We saw the Ravens kind of falter pretty big, kind of fell apart, against the Jaguars, and take nothing against the Jaguars. That was an amazing final drive last week. But I don't think Lamar Jackson has played well the last couple of games. And, of course, their 4 losses, every one of their 4 losses, they were up late in the fourth quarter and ended up losing the game. Where we sit right now, of course, the Ravens have one of the weakest schedules to round out the season. We have one of the toughest. What do the Bengals need to do to secure an AFC North championship this year, an AFC North title, and at least one home game moving into the playoffs?
I think you can only control what's in your control, and that's winning your games that are in front of you. And I think they started last week by taking on the Titans. Now they have 6 games left, which is nice because 4 of those games are at home.
Right.
3 of them are teams in front of them, right? And they got the Patriots that are right behind them. And then out of those 6 games, 2 of them are divisional games. So first they have to win the divisional games. That's going to be a must. They got to win those. And if they can take 3 out of the 6 and they get to 10, that's enough to make the playoffs. You got to hope that, and I'm going to say something that's sacrilegious to me. I'm just going to tell you. I'm going to have to cheer the Steelers on because the Steelers play the Ravens twice, and so do the Browns, and so do I. So the Ravens still have a lot of divisional games left to be played. So when it comes to that last game in the jungle, that might be for all the money. That might be for a divisional title if the Ravens keep losing some of these games. Now I think they got maybe the Falcons this week.
I believe you're right.
But I was glad, Trevor Lawrence is a hell of a quarterback. And so, he just isn't surrounded with all this talent, but to come up and beat them says a lot. And so we just have to take care of what's in front of us. And having, I don't care what anybody says. I'm in the jungle. Well, those fans are going crazy. And what I see compared to in the past was there's a lot of Bengal fans there, a lot. Before they would sell their tickets. That first game against the Steelers, there weren't quite as many Steeler fans because people didn't sell their tickets. There was like 62,000 people there. So for these big games for the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens that are all going to be played there, I think, fans are going to make a difference, and you saw that with Miami, when Tua had to call 2 timeouts just because he couldn't hear. So yes, people will say, hey, they got a tough schedule. Yes, we do, but we get to play 4 of those at home, and that is a huge difference.
Well, yeah, and I think that's I was just talking to somebody the other day about how loud Paycor Stadium gets. I remember as a teenager, shortly after that facility was built, and of course you're talking 35,000 people down there then. I never remembered it being that loud, but if you go back to last season, the playoff game at home last year, and the game against Miami, even the game against Carolina, I mean that place is louder than I've ever heard it before. It's almost like they've done something at Paycor Stadium to make it seem louder. I know that they haven't, but really the fans in Cincinnati have played huge roles in some of these games, and they're definitely showing up and they're getting loud. So, and I think you're absolutely right. I think at the end of the year, the last game of the season, it very well may come down to an AFC North title on the line when the Bengals play the Ravens, and I think maybe that's why there's not a time slotted yet for that game.
Right,
So, but yeah, I really think that moving forward, the Bengals offense is starting to look a lot better. I think Joe Burrow is kind of informed the last couple games that we kind of saw at the end of the year last year, where he's just making the right decisions. And, like last year, I know everybody always kind of puts a lot of emphasis on the stats that a quarterback has. Did he throw for over 300 yards? Did he throw for 3 touchdowns? Now, Joe Burrow only threw for 270 something last game against the Titans, but it's his demeanor on the field. It's the way that he leads the team that, he has. It seems like he has great clock management right now. It seems like he makes the proper decisions every time he needs to make those proper decisions. And, I was a little skeptical. You go back 3 weeks, I'm sure you've seen my social media. I've been skeptical of Zach Taylor's play calling. I kind of still feel like he needs to take a step back from that. But I was very skeptical that the Bengals were even going to make the playoffs this year, and maybe that's because I'm a pessimistic fan, because I've been let down so much in my life by this team. But, the last couple of weeks has kind of rejuvenated me and given me hope again, which may be the most dangerous thing to have as a Bengals fan. So, I'm pretty optimistic about what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. 3 weeks ago or a month ago, you would have asked me, going into this game against the Chiefs, how I thought the Bengals were going to fare, and I probably would have just put my head down and shook my head. But, I'm pretty cautiously optimistic about Sunday. So I know I'll be down there. You'll be down there, correct?
Yep, I'll be down there.
Yes. Go ahead.
I think for Joe Burrow, the thing that makes him special is he processes the defensive fronts very quickly, and he deciphers the best matchups. And so depending on who's on the field, whether it's T or Boyd or even Irwin, Trenton Irwin out there making big plays, he's a difference maker. So I think when he's out there, you always have a chance to win. And so we just have to protect him. This week's going to be tough, man. The offensive line's got a tough challenge because Chris Jones has 10 sacks for the season so far. Then, you look on the ends, and they're just as tough. Where you got former Bengal Carlos Dunlap who left. Probably not on good terms. Remember, he sold his house before he was even let go. He's like, "No, I'm out." And they just, I think that's when Zach Taylor just came in and he was cutting some of those veterans that weren't following suit with what he wanted for the Bengal culture. So that's going to be, I'm sure, a big storyline this week. And then George Karlaftis, man, I wanted him in the draft too. I wanted him bad. He's a tight or a defensive end who's just got a motor. I mean, he does not stop. And so Jonah Williams is going to have his hands full with this guy. But if they give Joe Burrow the time, he's going to make them pay. And you're seeing him run more. Like, he feels comfortable in this offense. And he's, I've watched him mature over the last 3 years by even, not trying to make all the plays. He throws balls away when he needs to. He slides when he needs to, even though he didn't, when he was running last week, he slid once and he went head first once.
Yeah.
To get the first down. Like, he's just a competitor, man, and he wants to play, and he's going to bring it every time. But when he has that calm demeanor about him, whether they're up or down, I think that calms the huddle down and really gets those guys going.
Well, I for one think that Joe Burrow needs to stop running the ball. Every time I see him take off, I hold my breath. Now, real quick to wrap it up, Jamar Chase should be back this week, if I'm not mistaken, which adds another weapon. Do you think that? Of course, I know he came out and said that he kind of held himself out against the Titans as a precautionary measure. Do you think that he'll get normal game reps this week, or do you think that he's going to see the field and probably not play much?
That's going to really be a game time decision. I don't know how much off work he's been able to do because of that hip, I mean, running stuff. So whether he's a decoy and he's out there just drawing double coverage, or they actually got him running in the playbook, I think the Chiefs have to account for him. because he made them pay big time last year. And once he outran a whole Chiefs defense secondary, he was gone.
Right.
So they'll have to account for him. That's big coming in. It'll relieve some of the pressure off T. Higgins, who you would not know because T's just been playing amazing, and maybe even open up some reps for Tyler Boyd over the middle to get. But I'm for one excited.
Me too.
I'm glad to see Chase come back. Hopefully he's back in. I wrote last week that he was. When Joe Burrow says I expect him back, you know what I mean?
Right.
I was like, if Joe said it, then
Right.
it has to be
Right.
true. And then I wrote it and I go, oh, well, they pulled him out at the last second. But all indications, even Rappaport said that he should play in this game. So I'm excited. I mean, this is the kind of game you need him to play in.
Yeah, and hopefully Mixon is makes it out of protocol this week. I know he always adds another weapon. He's come on fire as late. But Ty, we are all out of time for this week's show. As always, I appreciate it when you come on and talk with us about the Bengals. It's always fun. And again, tell us about Ty's Take real quick.
I run a Facebook page called Ty's Take. It's TY' Take TAKE. Or you can catch me on Twitter too at TY_Ty's Take. And I put I write articles, I post all kinds of stats, and it's for true Bengal fans that want to keep up on the latest news. That's where they go.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you what, that's where I get most of my Bengals news. He's like the Adam Scheffner for the Cincinnati Bengals. You want to hear it first? Ty has it. As I said, Ty, I appreciate you coming on. I want to thank everybody to listening to Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe this week. It's been a fun show. We'll see you next week. Have a good weekend, and God bless.